So the Buckeyes 21.5 over Nebraska. So we run down the lines in the Big Ten Week 1, courtesy Kevin via Bet Online. Let's see, Rutgers, Michigan State. I think this says more about Michigan State than it does Rutgers. Sparty at home, 11.5, you guys. That's it.
Well, you have a new coach, Mel Tucker, and he's going to, of course, Rutgers has a new coach with Greg Schiano, who wants to reestablish some things there. I would think Michigan State would win the game by a couple touchdowns, I would think. I don't have last year's results in front of me. It was probably a close game. Who knows? But, yeah, I would think Michigan State wins it at home, couple touchdowns. Honestly, there hasn't been a lot of news about any of these teams in the preseason. It's been kind of quiet with some of these teams that have dealt with some setbacks with COVID and different things. I know both those schools did just in the last 2 months. So whether that put them behind the 8 ball or not in preparing for the new season, I don't know. But, Michigan State, new coach, new quarterback, Rutgers, up in the air, who's even playing for them, quarterback, I think. So I would think Michigan State would roll, no question, in that game.
Yeah, Michigan State won 27-0 last time. Michigan State's won six of the last 6 games. The thing that I see here is it really kind of shows the disparity in the bottom part of the Big Ten, because I think that everybody across the board probably has Rutgers finishing last in the Big Ten, at least certainly in the East. And Michigan State may be right there with them, and there's still 11.5 points of difference there. So I think Rutgers will come out and will probably be a little bit better than people expect. That doesn't mean I'm saying they're going to have any unpredicted wins that are going to happen out of that, but I think they'll give them a game for a little bit. I'm just not sure where this Michigan State offense is going to come from at this point. Is Rocky Lombardi going to be their quarterback? Is it going to be one of the kids? Who's going to run the ball for them? I don't know enough about Sparty at this point. I don't want to make any unfair characterizations, but it never felt like Michigan State, in terms of its administration, ever was really on board with wanting to play football in the first place this year. So I don't know if that's something that's infectious or not, and if that kind of permeates through the team ranks or whatnot. But I like Michigan State to cover, but I don't see a game that is like a 28-point margin or anything like that. I think this sits in that 14 to 17 point range.
All right, interesting battle here in Bloomington coming up in Week 1, where Penn State 2 years ago went to Indiana, held on for dear life in beating the Hoosiers, much like the upper crust of the Big Ten East is used to. Last year, the Hoosiers went to Happy Valley. It was a really good ball game, but one of those where Penn State was somewhat comfortable, 1-2 scores, but Indiana closed it within 1 score, and it was that type of game, like 34-27, something in that range. And Penn State goes to Indiana, Steve, with a 7-point favorite.
Yeah, Indiana has talked like they're ready to take the next step, and to do that, you're going to have to beat one of the big 3, Penn State, Michigan, or Ohio State. They've come close on Penn State and Michigan in recent years. Still a long ways to go for them to catch Ohio State. It's usually a multi-touchdown spread when the Buckeyes play Indiana, and haven't lost to them, I don't think, since, 89 maybe, 88, 89, 88 maybe. So, any rate, opportunity for Indiana to start the season on such a high note after getting to the Gator Bowl last year, a game that they probably should have won against Tennessee. Penn State is a national top 10 team and has aspirations of playing in the playoff if they can beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten. So, kind of two worlds converging there. Indiana trying to claw its way up into the penthouse of the Big Ten East, and Penn State having bigger fish to fry and could possibly overlook Indiana. Interesting opener, I'd say, for Penn State on the road at Indiana. I mean, this is not a Rutgers or a Maryland that you're going into play. You're playing a team that played most of the schools on its schedule pretty close last year, Ohio State being the one outlier. So, I would look for a competitive game for sure. Penix is the quarterback at Indiana now, as opposed to Ramsey, who moved on to Northwestern. And Ramsey had them competitive in a lot of those games last year. So now we'll see if Penix is able to do the same this coming year and make that a competitive game next week. I would think Penn State would win the game. 7, man, that's a tough line on the road because, as you said, this has this 34-27 feel to it that, Indiana scores a field goal or a touchdown late to get it down to 7, and onside kick, they don't get it. Penn State runs 2 plays, and they all wave to one another at the end of the game because they can't shake hands. But although we are seeing a lot of post-game hugs around the NFL and college football in recent weeks, so the post-game protocol of not gathering on the field has kind of gone by the wayside. But I would look at Penn State there, obviously, to start out 1-0.
Yeah, the game last year was 34-27.
Oh, I nailed it. I just looked it up myself. Yeah.
And the year before that was 33-28.
I remember that game.
Have played 23 times, and Penn State has won 22 of them. So
wow.
You have to go all the way back to 2013 for Indiana's lone win, a 44-24 win in Bloomington.
Wow.
7 is, that's a tasty line right there. I'm just not sure. I would avoid this one like the plague, and that's probably not apropos to talk about right now during these days and times. But I don't know. I mean, I think everybody believes that Penn State is, if they're not the number 2 team in the Big Ten East, I'm sure they're the people who believe that they'll get by Ohio State, and not for me to judge on that. I think there's more debate on who's that 3rd team, if it's Indiana or if it's Michigan. I think it's traditionally people are going to want to say Michigan, but I know Indiana's kind of that sexy pick right there. So coming right out of the gate, you have a tremendous game if you truly believe this is 2 versus 3 in terms of the Big Ten East. I think Indiana with Michael Penix, he really gives them more of a dual threat than Peyton Ramsey did. And we know teams just always seem to struggle with that dual threat type of quarterback. The game being in Bloomington, I mean, strange things could happen. If I'm Indiana, I want to draw them week 1. I think Penn State, just behind Sean Clifford, is going to be too strong. But I think Indiana's going to give them a hell of a game.
Lines from week 1. So Iowa, Purdue. Of course, the Hawkeyes are coming off a nice 10-3 year. Lose Nathan Stanley at quarterback. Purdue's at home. Hawkeyes a 2.5-point favorite, Steve.
Kind of like Iowa there. Purdue is doing some good things with Braum. Obviously helps to have Rondale Moore back. He might be worth a touchdown just on his own. Probably will score a couple in almost every game Purdue plays this year, 1 or 2 maybe. But Iowa has a new quarterback, obviously, going into the season. I don't know. It just feels like Iowa's at a level and Purdue's at a lower level. And even though the game appears to be at Purdue, I would think that Iowa's probably the pick there. If Purdue were win the game, I would be mildly, if not completely surprised. But again, I don't know everything that Purdue's putting together right now. Ohio State not playing Purdue, not playing Iowa. So I really haven't kept the closest tabs on either of them, but I would be interested. Should be a competitive game for sure.
Now, I was trying to come up with a score, Kevin, for this one, but it just didn't click. I know that 2 years ago, I try to remember scores. Well, I don't try to remember the scores. It's just the way my brain works. But I know 2 years ago, when Purdue had the good team that beat Ohio State, they won like a barn burner, like a 38-36 at home, but they played in Iowa last year, and I don't recall that game at all.
20, but I can't remember these. I'm looking them up since I know Steve is getting first crack at them. I'm jumping on Winsipedia and getting trends and things along those lines there. I'm going to take Purdue in this one. I'm just going to give it based on home field, and I know home field doesn't mean much with no fans in the Big Ten or whatnot, but this just seems like one of those types of games that Purdue is going to win at home. Iowa is always good for a crazy win here or there at home, generally at night. I think if you're gonna get Iowa, get them early when they're breaking in a new quarterback. I think that Rondale Moore is going to with his reemergence of coming back after opting back in, I think he's going to have a big game here in week 1. And it's just going to be a lot of pressure for these guys to come out there and really just bring it every play, because you don't know how many games you're going to get, to be quite honest. What are we up to? 6, 7 games this week that have been postponed. So you better make the most out of every game. And I just think that from 1 to 22 in terms of starters, I just think Purdue's a more talented team.
Ohio State football talk with Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove Rivals and Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports. All right, if I could only watch one game in the Big Ten next week, this is the one. Michigan at Minnesota. Gophers a 2.5-point favorite. There you go, Steve.
Well, that's crazy talk. I don't know. Man, Michigan has been propped up for years on the name Michigan, preseason 8 or 10 spots higher than where they typically end up for about 15 years now. And they're coming into the season in that 16, 17, 18 range, but so's Minnesota. And the game's being played at Minnesota. Man, that's almost like a flip a coin type game. You give Minnesota the edge at quarterback with Tanner Morgan back and Joe Milton making his first start for Michigan. We do know that much. And I know Minnesota got at least 1 or 2 of the guys who had opted out to come back. Rashard Bateman, does that name ring a bell? Is he the guy who?
Yeah,
am I right?
He's a stud. Yep.
Rashad Bateman, yeah, he decided to come back. And that's big for them. I don't see where they played last year.
They haven't played in 2017.
To 2017, yeah. And they play for the Paul Bunyan Axe, I believe, don't they?
Jug, because
the little brown jug.
There's a jug of water that was left back behind or something, and
yeah.
I guess
what a great rivalry torn apart by divisional play. Kind of like Ohio State and the Illabuck. Man, we're going to find out immediately on week 1 whether Michigan is a fraud or not. You don't have to wait several weeks on this one. You're going to find out. If they go into Minnesota and win that game, you can say, okay, they're somewhat legitimate. If they go up there and get rocked around like they did at Wisconsin last year, then they're a fraud. So I don't know. I can't pick a winner in that game. I guess I need to know more about what's happened in preseason for both those teams and kind of listen to what the coaches are saying about their teams to get a fuller idea of what team is taking the field. But, man, Minnesota was playing good ball last year, and Michigan, really woefully underachieved again in everyone's estimation. So I don't know. In Michigan, they just don't connect the dots. They recruit reasonably well enough, but when the big game comes around, the key guys aren't there. And I don't know how to put it any other way. They don't show up like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Nico Collins last year against Ohio State. Maybe they're getting the running back from 2 years ago, and maybe he'll help them, but Michigan just doesn't connect the dots in the big games. And, Minnesota has been lately. So that one could go either way. If you put a gun to my head, I'd say Michigan wins it just to prolong the agony so that they can be exposed as a fraud at a later date.
You look at the history here, and since 1987, Minnesota's only won twice, 2014 and 2005. And when you get into they played yearly from 2008 prior, and then once the teams or the conference split divisions, it became a little bit more infrequent there. Last time they played in 2017, which really doesn't have a lot of bearing here in 2020, it was a 33-10 Michigan win. I really think that they're trying to get people to jump on Michigan there by giving them a couple of points, but I think that ultimately the return of Chris Evans at running back is going to mean something. The interesting thing that's going on right now is I really feel defense is way behind offenses there. And Michigan needs to win some of these games with defense. I don't think they're going to necessarily have the offense. So if offense, I just don't know. I think I'm going to say Michigan's going to win this game because of the fact that they're just a more talented team. I think that if you sit there and you look at Rashad Bateman might be the best player on the field. But with that being said, I don't think that Minnesota has 5 or 6 other guys who are half a step below where Bateman is or whatnot. And when it just comes down to average player, I think Michigan is a much more talented team. I'm not necessarily sold on either coach per se, but I like Jim Harbaugh's foolishness better than I like PJ Fleck's foolishness. So I'll say Michigan by 9.
Yeah, but Harbaugh's foolishness has gone stale. PJ's is still a little bit fresh at this point. I will say that Minnesota, when you look at the results of what happened last year, we will see if that's an aberration, this just peaking at 11-2, or whether they can maintain that. Steve mentioned them getting throttled against Wisconsin with the Big Ten Western Division title on the line by 31 points. But other than that, they beat Penn State. They beat everybody else in the division. Aside from a very close loss against Iowa, like a 22-19, 23-19, something in that range, beating Auburn as a touchdown underdog in a bowl game, impressive showing by Minnesota. Yes, the recruiting rankings would tell us that Michigan has the better team. But if anything, Steve, you mentioned Michigan's just marginal state of just in this. They're almost in this, as my Michigan podcast guy likes to say, they're in the friend zone. They're in the college football friend zone. They're just, they're always kind of a step or two away. But if anything, they've been consistently decent, 9-3 decent under Harbaugh, basically every year, and that's what they've been. So it should be an interesting one, Minnesota and Michigan. That would be the game I would want to see. Northwestern being an 11-point favorite against anybody seems a bit high just because they have trouble scoring 11 points. So it's Maryland at Northwestern, Wildcats by 11.
In the history of that series, the one-game history of that series, and of course I've closed the window or whatnot, I don't know. I mean, Maryland is a team that got decimated with opt-outs and nobody opted back in. We talked about Peyton Ramsey earlier. I think he's going to be a more successful transfer than Hunter Johnson was. Sure, why not? Let's say Northwestern by 14. But that's really a guess. I think Maryland, in terms of if they were a full roster and they had everybody and it was a normal year, I would probably like Maryland a little bit better. But I think based on just what we have right now, and what Maryland's not going to have, I think Northwestern should be able to cover.